All right, let's start the webinar for today. Hello and welcome to the new Expert Developer webinar. My name is Jan de Vries and I will be your host for today. Today's webinar will be about your quality assurance mindset in Mendix and will be presented by Clyde Waal and Melvin Grotenboers. Clyde will focus on quality assurance from a process and team perspective, followed by a practical demo by Melvin, who will guide you through the process of creating automated tests. During the webinar, you can submit your questions in the question window. After the demo, we will go through the questions and let Clyde and Melvin answer them. The questions and their answers will be posted on the webinar page after the webinar. Before we start, please look at the handouts window in GoToWebinar to find the presentation slides. Thank you for joining and enjoy the presentation. I'll now give the floor to Clyde.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you in the audience for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to have a little talk on quality assurance. Today we will broadly cover three questions. The first question is, what is quality assurance and why is it important? The second question is, how do you do quality assurance in a Mendix context? And at the top of the hour, my colleague Melvin Grotenboers will give a demonstration of how you can do automated testing using Selenium and TestNG. To start our discussion, let's look at where you use Mendix in your organization. You might as well be familiar with the bimodal IT strategy put forward by Gartner, which identifies two modes of IT delivery for your organization. The mode 1, which focuses on stability and which you use for your systems of record, so you can think of your CRM system or your finance application. This mode is sequential and it emphasizes safety and accuracy. Mode 2 is your systems of innovation. This is where you use Mendix. So here you can think of the systems that you develop to keep pace with market demands. This mode is focused on agility and it's exploratory and emphasizes speed. The challenge is, if you do innovation at the speed of ideas in mode 2 and you use Mendix, how can you ensure that you deliver quality software? But first, let's take a step back and look at why this is important. It is common knowledge in software development that fixing defects should be done as early as possible. This is because fixing defects in a later stage of software development makes it a lot more expensive. There's a well-known saying that says that every phase of development if you find a defect later, then it's 10 times the cost. So we want to find defects as early as possible to minimize costs. And you can see this depicted here. It's not about the actual figures, but it's about the trend. We want to minimize the costs by finding our defects as quickly as possible. So now let's focus on quality assurance in Mendix. What we often see in the field and at customers is that there is a notion that quality assurance and agility are at odds with each other. What we like to put forward is that they are actually not at odds and that they have the same goal in mind. Feedback is actually at the heart of both agility and quality assurance. So in agility, we emphasize to fail fast and fail often. On quality assurance, we need the feedback to improve our product. So what we like to put forward is that quality assurance practices in an agile environment when using Mendix are just aligned differently compared to more traditional waterfall environments. It's aligned differently in timing, it's different in the way that you engage your people and your team, and it's different in the tooling and automation that you use. We'll elaborate on those topics in the coming hour. But before we do that, it's important to note that quality assurance is actually an organization-wide concern, and it has impact on many domains of software delivery. If you want to do quality assurance, especially in larger organizations, you should also take care of things like continuous integration, maintainability, and architecture governance. In this webinar, however, we will focus on the team process of quality and also on the tooling that you can use within your team to ensure quality delivery of software. To do that, we put forward 4 principles. And those 4 principles will help you to get the right mindset to do quality assurance in your Mendix projects. The first one is that you should integrate testing with development. This means that you want to actually embed testing within your sprint the same time you develop functionality and done by the same team members that build functionality. You can see this depicted in the third flow on this slide. This is in a big contrast with the more traditional waterfall software development projects, where you often see testing being done in a separate phase after building the software and often executed by separate teams, even with their own management and their own test managers. What you want in an agile environment is to do it in one go and not have this separation. What we often see happen though is that companies do their agile development, in an agile way, but do testing in a more traditional way, which you see depicted in the second flow. So they get stuck in the middle. The goal is actually, as you mature, to move towards the integrated agile approach, which is the third flow here, and make sure that all your team members see quality as a team effort and they have a shared understanding of the need to deliver quality software. This means that the testers should be well aware of Mendix and how the platform functions and should all be responsible to deliver quality software. If you do it that way, you prevent the drawbacks of the traditional approach, which is that feedback will come too late and that can trigger expensive rework. Also, it can trigger friction between team members which are more focused on development and team members which are more focused on testing. The second principle to be successful with quality assurance in the Mendix context is to target your testing and to target it towards the high-risk areas of your application. So that means that you identify collectively with your team early in the sprint meeting where the high business risk parts of your application are, and you focus your testing specifically towards those areas. Risk poker is a way you can do this, and it will be explained in the blog that will be published tomorrow and accompanies this webinar. It is also important, especially in a Mendix context, to not test the Mendix framework itself. The Mendix components are tested for you by our quality assurance department, and you don't need to test those yourself. Be sure to focus your testing on your own logic. To get a more better feel of which components are tested in Mendix and also examples for you to comprehend what you should and should not test yourself, there will also be a more elaborate explanation in the blog that will be published tomorrow online. The third principle is that you should involve your end users as quickly as possible and actively. What this means is that you actually expose your users to the app not only with passive demos, but also actively by giving them a login to the application and allowing them to provide feedback. This process is actually facilitated by Mendix through the use of the feedback widget, which you can use out of the box and allows your users to provide textual feedback on the application and include screenshots as well. This feedback will then be shown to your development team in context in the developer portal, where they can see the feedback related to the story it is about. Also, Mendix helps this quick feedback process by enabling one-click deployment, so you can quickly stage the improvements that you've made to your users in the acceptance-oriented test environment and have them provide feedback as rapidly as possible. The fourth principle that is important to keep in mind is to adopt lightweight quality assurance practices. These lightweight practices can be divided in two categories. The first is people and process practices. These center around how you manage the development process in your team and how you manage the people. The second category is modeling practices, which contains practices that will help to make your model more readable and more easy to improve in the future. All these practices will be explained and outlined in the blog that will be published tomorrow on the Mendix website. An area that needs special attention is very popular in the community is automated testing. Automated testing becomes important as your application grows in size. when you add new functionality, it becomes important to test your existing functionality, and to keep that manageable, that workload, at some point you need to start automating this regression testing. That can be done on 3 levels. It can be done on the unit level, so that's the smallest functional level of your application, and for this you can use the unit testing module, which is available in the Mendix App Store. You can also test the integration that your app has with existing systems. For this we often use SOAP UI within Mendix, which is an open source tool to not only test interfaces with other systems, but also simulate services from other systems. The third level of testing is UI testing, which allows you to test the actual browser experience. And the solution for this is Selenium, which automates browsers. It should be noted that these are just some solutions that are possible. There are many other solutions out there in the market, and we also have Mendix partners that provide solutions for testing as well. So please make sure that you examine the available options and make a considered choice. But for now, I would like to hand over the microphone to my colleague Melvin Grotenboers, who will give you a demonstration of how to do automated testing using Selenium and TestNG.
Thank you very much, Clyde, for the nice presentation. I will now give a demo about an automated test created with TestNG and Selenium. For this demo, I downloaded the company expenses app, and I will run it locally. I downloaded the company expenses app from the App Store with the newest Mendix business modeler version 5.21. And during this, yes, I will open it in the browser. I will sign in with MX admin password 1, click sign in, and I will click on the expenses tab, click on new expense, clear the amount field, enter an amount, select the description. In this case I will select accommodation, and all the other fields are not mandatory, so I will click on save and I will sign out. This manual test case took me almost 1 minute, and we can do it way more faster. I will first show you the final test script I created in TestNG, and I will run it to give you an example of how fast it will run. And after that I will explain the complete code that you can see in here right now. I will run this test script. Allow access. It will sign in, go to the expenses tab, create a new expense and sign out within a couple of seconds. Way more faster than we did manually. So now you are interested in how to create this automated test. First you need a TestNG plugin in Eclipse. So Eclipse is already open, as you can see. We have to download the TestNG plugin from the Eclipse marketplace. Search for TestNG, press go, and here you can see normally the button will say install, but I already installed the TestNG plugin for Eclipse, so we can cancel this one, and we need to create a new Java project. How we can do that? You can click on the new button and select the Java folder and select Java project. Click next. We have to give it a name, so we say my first Java project and click next. Here we need to add some libraries. We need the Selenium library and we need the TestNG library. So first we can add the TestNG library by clicking TestNG, click next and finish. We also need to add the Selenium libraries. You can download these on the Selenium website. I already downloaded it for this demo, so we say add external, add these two, and we also need to add all the other ones that are in this folder, so we add these. Click on finish, and now we created our first Java project. Now we want to create the TestNG file. We can do that by clicking on new, go to the TestNG folder, select TestNG class, and select the folder where you want to store this. Now we want to store this in the source folder of my first Java project. Click OK. Enter a package name. We will call it my first TestNG package. We can enter a name. We call it my first TestNG file. We select the before test and after test annotation. I will explain it later what that means, and click finish. Now there's some code generated for us. We can see here test, which means that the test, this is the test annotation, and it is used to tell that the method under it is a test case. In this case the method f is a test case. The add before test annotation is used to tell that the method under it will be executed before the first test case, and the after test annotation is used to tell that the method under it will be executed after the last test case. I will create some code in the before test. The first thing we have to do is we have to create a driver. So that will be in the before test. I'll copy this thing. Here it is. There's a red line under it, so we need to import some statements. By pressing Ctrl-Shift-O, you will import missing statements and removed unused import statements. So press Ctrl-Shift-O, and you will see there are a lot of statements added to the code. So we now have a before test created, which opens the Firefox browser. After the last test case, we want to close the browser. So we need to add some code to close the browser. Driver.close will close the browser. The next step is to log in, to go to the right website. So we will change the F method into the OpenApp method. In this code, the browser will go to the local host. That's the location of the app we just deployed in the Mendix business modeler. I will now copy paste some other code because I will not type it in because it takes too much time. So I will add all the other test cases I already created before, and I will explain what it's doing. There are a lot of red lines again, so we will press Ctrl-Shift-O to organize all the imports again. The second test I created is the login test case. We first need to enter the username. After that we have to enter a password, and then we have to click on the sign in button. And I think you're all interested in what's this telling us. Hashtag username input. I will show you right away. Within Firefox you can add a plugin which is called Firebug. And with Firebug has also another plugin which is called Firepod, in which you can inspect and generate CSS selectors. And the CSS selectors is the thing we need in the automated test. So when we click on the inspect element icon and click on the username field, it will returns us in this case an ID. Here you can see the ID of the username field is username input. The CSS selector will be, when it's an ID, it will be hashtag and hashtag plus the name of the ID. So in this case it will be hashtag username input. We use this in the test case to find the element, to locate the element. We did the same for the password field and for the login button. So then we added login. We now will go to the second test case, which is the open expenses tab, which clicks on the expenses tab, and here you will not see a hashtag with a name, but here you see .mx-name-tab page 4. Tab page 4 is the name of the element in the modeler. So when we go to the modeler and go to the page desktop admin menu, which has the expenses tab, when we click on the expenses tab, we can see that the name of the element is tab page 4. It will automatically get a class name dot of mx-name- the name of the element. We use this CSS selector in the code for the expenses tab. We did the same for the test case create expense. The name of the new expense button is new button 3, so we added a dot mx-name- to it, so it is a unique CSS selector for this element. We first will click on the new expense button, and then a pop-up appears, and the amount field is the default value is 0, so we first need to clear the field before we enter a new value. We did the same for the other parts, for the reference selector and the save button. When the expense is created, we want to sign out, and also the same with the name plus the name of the element. So let's now run this test case and see if it's working. Run TestNG test. Needs to save. We click OK. And let's see in the results of the running class if there are any errors. Here we see some errors. There are a lot of errors we can see, and I will explain you why. By default, the methods annotated with @test are executed alphabetically, but there's a solution for that one. We can use parameters to modify the annotations function. The parameter priority can be used to execute the methods in a different order, and TestNG will execute the @test annotation with the lowest priority value up to the largest. So now I will add the priority to all the tests. The first one will get login, will get priority is 1. and I will do the same for all the other ones. So I will copy paste the code I had, and now all the tests have a priority 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. Let's run the test again and check if all tests will pass this time. It will open the browser, log in and log out. We have 2 failures right now. Let's check what kind of failures we have at this moment. Open app went good, login passed, but the open expenses tab failed. Why did it fail? It's unable to locate the element. The reason for that is when you log in, it can take some time before the element is loaded. So we need to create a wait, and we don't want to wait 30 seconds. We want to wait until the element is visible. So we need to create a wait for before we will click on the expenses tab. We can add a WebDriver wait, and I will copy paste it and paste it here, and there are some red lines, so we do Ctrl-Shift-O to import the missing statements. A WebDriver wait will wait for this test method calls the expected condition every 500 milliseconds until it returns successfully or 10 seconds are passed. When 10 seconds are passed and the element is not located, a timeout exception will be thrown. If the element is located within 10 seconds, the method will click on the element with class name, in this case mx name tab page 4, and the class of this the CSS selector of this tab I already explained in the previous test. So let's check if it's working when we created a wait. Run as TestNG test. Hopefully all test cases will pass this time. We log in, we wait till the expenses tab, we click on the expenses tab, and 0 failures right now. Every test case passed, and so these test cases are created well. But it could be possible that it couldn't find the amount field and the description field, because it's on a when you click on the new expense button, it will open in a pop-up, and sometimes Selenium doesn't know on which page it has to search for an element, on the pop-up page or on the page behind it. So to be sure it will find the right one, we can add mx window active in the CSS selector to be sure it will find the element on the active page, in this case the pop-up. So we will copy paste some code again and add mx window active to all elements on the pop-up window. Copy paste. And window active is added to all the elements. Let's run this test again to be sure this one passed as well. Go to the page, log in, click on the expenses tab, add all values and log out. So the test case passed. Yippee within almost 12 seconds. Another nice thing about TestNG is that it creates a test report for you. When we refresh this folder, it will create a folder which is called test output. Let's open that one, and it has a page index.html. We want to open this in a web browser. It will open in the default browser of Eclipse, and we can see all suites. Now we had only one, the default one. We can see how many tests are in there, but we only created the my first TestNG file. Here you can see which test method took a lot of time. Now the open expenses step, in this case, almost 2 seconds or more than 2 seconds. A reporter output doesn't tell us anything. And we can click here to see all tests that are passed and that are in this test. I think that's the demo. If you want to know more about TestNG and Mendix, there's an how-to online, and we created a new test homepage. A new test landing page. Let's go to the Doxin API. And scroll down to go to the testing section. Here it is. And here you can see the how to creating automated tests with TestNG, which will help you with a lot of things. And it also shows you how to create an automated test that will run cross-browser, and how you can create your own test suite. That's it. I will now we will now answer some questions.
All right, thank you very much, Clyde and Melvin. Great presentation. Wow, I mean, I learned a lot from this, even though I'm not even a tester, but this makes me want to test all kinds of stuff. Let's look at some questions. You can submit your questions through the question window. We've already got some questions. Please feel free to add any question that you have. The first question comes from Ecomol. The question is, how do you suggest we test the Mendix framework when new versions of the framework are released? We often lack information of the changes that influence the framework, especially changes in the user interface. So I'll give the floor to Clyde on this one. Clyde, do you have an answer for Eco?
Yes. Well, what is important to note is that you do not test the Mendix framework itself, and it's an important point we made in this webinar. We already test the framework thoroughly, so make sure you do not test the framework itself. Also, our quality assurance department is testing standard Mendix functionality over releases. So when there is a new release, nothing should break. If something breaks, it should be specified in the release notes. So please be careful that you always read the release notes of a new Mendix release when you upgrade. And there you can find the information needed to keep your applications running.
All right, thank you very much, Clyde. Let's have a look at the next question. This question comes from Yvonne Kleefkens. She says, what kind of tools would you use for simulated load testing?
Actually, from a Mendix point of view, you can use any normal tool that is available in the marketplace to do load testing. We don't have a Mendix specific solution for that, at least not publicly packaged. So if you really want to go into this area, we recommend that you use some expert services from Mendix, because we do this as a custom solution for customers, and there you can find a solution to do load testing in the correct way, because it can be tricky.
Great, thank you. The next question, also from Eko Mol, he asks, is it also possible to set up automated testing without knowledge of Java?
On a high level, there are two ways to do this. The first way is to use a solution that actually records the test case directly from the browser. There are some commercial solutions that do this, and there are also open source solutions that do this. For example, you can look at the Firefox Selenium IDE plugin. And there's also how to use that specific plugin on the Mendix website. This plugin has, obviously, like any solution, also some drawbacks. So, for example, if you want to do sequential testing, so where you log into your Mendix application as one test case and then you execute another action on top of that as a second test case, this is more difficult to do when you use this plugin. So that's the drawback of using a recorded test case scenario. So the second way to approach this is to actually drive. If the solution we just showed you was Selenium and that was being driven by TestNG, which is, as you have seen, a Java framework to instruct Selenium what to test. You can also instruct Selenium in different ways, and that makes it also possible to create some smart logic around that. And we have several partners who have done that. So they abstract away some of the manual searching that you saw Melvin doing, and they make it possible to more easily pick, for example, the right CSS selector and then drive Selenium from there. So please take a look also what's available within the Mendix community and solutions from partners that can help you create tests without knowledge of Java.
Great, thank you very much for that elaborate answer. Let's see, there is another question from Gerard Odding. He asks, is it possible to record a test and play back the recorded test?
Yeah, actually, as I just mentioned, that can be done using, for example, the Selenium IDE plugin. That's an open source solution, and it's a plugin for Firefox that allows you to record browser actions and then re-execute them. But there are also commercial solutions that offer similar functionality. So yeah, it's possible to do that.
All right, a question from Willem-Jan Kortleven. He asks, can the same be done using Visual Studio? So I'm guessing he's referring to the TestNG Java testing. Do you know anything about that, Clyde?
Personally, I don't have the answer to that question. You have, Melvin? No? Okay, then I think we need to look this one up, and we will address it in the post that will be published after this blog.
Okay, great. So we owe you an answer to that, Willem-Jan. Thank you very much for asking. We'll work out all the questions and their answers, and even if we don't, if we can't answer any questions during this webinar, we'll get you the answer and post it on the webinar page after the webinar. Martin Nelissen asks, how can I integrate TestNG with SoapUI in order to test apps which use user interaction and web services? It's a pretty loaded question. Clyde or Melvin, do you know anything about this?
I don't have the answer to that question on top of my head, no. I really have to look into that.
Okay. Second question that we'll owe the answer to. Let's see, we have another question. How can we create unit tests for microflows without having to have to test the code built in as part of the application? So how can we create unit tests for microflows without having to test code built in as part of the application?
I'm not sure I completely understand this question, but as explained before, it's possible to use the unit testing module, which allows you to at least have a testing microflow, and that's not integrated with your normal functionality microflow, so they are separated. And first, I'm not really sure what this question is pointing at, to be honest.
Okay, great. Adrian, maybe you can clarify your question, and we'll try to answer as best as we can. We don't have any new questions, so please, if you want to know anything, if you have any new questions, please do so through the question window. We just got another question from Ecomol. Is it also possible to check the result of a database transaction?
Again, I'm not really sure what exactly is being pointed at, but what I can say from a general point of view is that when you commit data in your Mendix application, we guarantee that it's committed to your database, because that will also be explained, by the way, in the blog that will be published tomorrow. The Mendix modeler continuously does a lot of consistency checks on your model, and that means that whenever you commit something, you define a commit in the business modeler, it is actually possible to do that commit. And so the fields are available in your domain model and also in your database. So from that point of view, it's not necessary to actually test if something is written in a database. I hope I address your question with this answer, but it's the best I can give.
All right. We have another question from Flores. He says, do you advise us to always write automated tests for our test project? Now, I know actually that Melvin has answered that question in one of his how-tos and blog posts. So be sure to check out the blog posts, and we'll add that answer to the webinar page as well. Now, Willem-Jan Kortleven asks another question. He says, this webinar focuses on UI testing. Is there another webinar for unit testing available or planned? At the moment, we don't have another testing webinar planned yet. However, using this feedback and your requests, we'll definitely try to schedule a webinar on that topic in the future. So thank you very much for that. Adrian Preston asks, in my experience with Java unit tests, are not part of the application code. In Mendix, the unit test microflows have to be part of the app being tested, and so are deployed along with the application. How can we avoid this?
From my understanding, this cannot be avoided, but I will check it and also come back to this and see if there is a way. But my understanding is it cannot be done.
All right. Let's see if we have any more questions. Do you have pointers on how to integrate sequences within a testing script? For instance, how do you loop over a list of 10 expenses? I can see Clyde and Melvin thinking about this very, very hard, so I'll just give them a second to process this.
Well, actually what Melvin showed you in the demo is that you can drive the test scripts using your code, and in that way you can also implement logic that will repeat your test and form a sequence. So if you do it in the way that Melvin showed you, it's possible to create this kind of sequencing logic and run your tests accordingly.
Okay, thank you. We're just scrolling through the list, trying to look at some of the questions. Ramli Somers asks, is there a way to time travel as part of a test suite or the Mendix modeler?
Really?
Sounds like an episode of Doctor Who.
That's fun. No, I'm not aware that you can time travel. Let's do another one.
Is there a way to load a standard data set from a test suite? So example data or...
Obviously, this also comes down to the tooling that you choose. So again, the example that Melvin showed you, using TestNG and driving Selenium from Java code, you can use any code or library that you want to import test data or import it from a database and do whatever you want. So this really comes down to the specific testing tooling that you choose and how to do that.
Okay, let's go on with the next question by Adrian Walters. He says, during the demo, the commit would fail due to a missing field, but the test passed. How do we address that? So I think this is going to be one for Melvin.
I think there was a difference between the third run and the fourth one. The third went well, but we needed to add some code to be sure that the element was on the pop-up, on the active window. Normally it should fail. So the best thing is to do there is to add the mx window active class to the CSS selector as well.
Okay, thank you. Adrian, does that answer your question? I'll continue with the next one in the meantime. By Kilian Kruse. He says, so a lot of times you need information from the database to unit test microflows. What options are there to unit test microflows without maintaining a test database? So what options are there to use mock data and make that part of the test? So I'll hand this one over to Melvin. To Clyde.
And I have to say, I have to research this question and come back with an elaborate answer. And from the platform, we don't facilitate the storage or the creation of mock data. So there needs to be a creative solution here. So I'll come back to it.
Let's see, we have another one. Could we integrate log messages and database data with screen output to create test cases with TestNG? So could we integrate log messages and database data with screen output to create test cases with TestNG?
We will look this answer up and add it to the question and answer of the webinar within a few days.
Okay, thank you very much. That looks like all the questions we have for now. There's a lot of questions, and we've got a lot of different answers. We'll work out every question and add the answers to the webinar page. So we'll let you know about everything you've asked and post it on the forum, and it will also be in the newsletter, and you'll receive an email after the webinar that also has a link to the page in which you can find all your answers. We have one last question by Adrian. What constitutes a failed test as opposed to a value test? So by which I mean if a new mandatory field was introduced but not filled, how would we know? A final step to check the view closed?
I'm not sure if I understand this one completely again, but well, the more general statement would be, of course, the scope of your test case will define what you actually test. So if you want to include this, then you will have to bring this into your test case yourself. That's the only general answer I can give to this one.
And you can also add an verified test if the pop-up is closed and the in this case the expense is added to the expenses data grid.
All right, great. Thank you very much, everyone. This is the last question, so we'll round up the webinar. Thank you all very much for attending. As mentioned before, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the webinar website. You can find it through developers.mendix.com. Be sure to sign up for the next webinar, which will be in December. We'll announce it soon. And if you have any more questions or you want to know more about testing, check out the documentation on testing or post your questions on the forum. Thank you very much and see you at the next webinar.